Welcome to the coop. Gather around, girls, as we continue the story of Jesus. So at this point, Jesus is in Egypt, and an angel heads off. And again, with these angels, very busy back in those days. I wish we can get some angels that would just visit us here and there. You know, just swing on by and say, go here, don't go there. But that's so. It is said in the Bible that his son would be called out of Egypt. So there's another prophecy, another fulfillment area that, you know, the Bible just keeps pointing toward Jesus to be the man that he is, the person that he is. So on the way back from Egypt, they pack everybody up. They're on their way back, and Joseph finds out that King Herod's son actually took over, and he gets nervous, and they decide to kind of take a detour off, and they head over to Nazareth, which is another, you know, kind of important thing, because they claim that the prophecy says that, you know, the Messiah will be a Nazarene. So he's coming from Nazareth. So called out of Egypt, heads over to Nazareth. Now here's where we have a little bit of space in between what's going on. We don't know how long, you know, it took for King Herod to die. We don't know how long it took for, you know, Jesus to kind of grow into it. But here's the thing. I like to kind of speculate. A lot of people, you know, speculate on Jesus was a kid. I mean, he was a child. There's no other way around it. One thing we do know about Jesus is his parents were very religious. They followed the law. They taught him. They brought him up right and all this other stuff. From what I understand, that, you know, he played games. They had balls. They had a little hoop with the stick, and they would play that, hide and seek, stuff like that. I kind of look at it this way. Jesus was the only person in the world that never sinned, like blameless and sinless. So I kind of chuckle, because someone who has a rough side to himself, you look at it and I said, Jesus might not have been liked so much as a child, because he was blameless and sinless. So you got to figure, he didn't lie, he didn't cheat, he didn't steal. So if he did something wrong and they brought everybody in and they were like, who did it, Jesus would be like, it's that guy. You know what I mean? How many times can you hear, you should be more like Jesus? Jesus wouldn't do that, you know, things like that. So you know that his childhood was basically a very religious one. You also know that his father was a carpenter. Back then, you would transfer that trade from generation to generation. So, you know, he's a carpenter too. He probably did a lot of woodworking with his dad and things like that. But in between there, from, you know, being a baby in Egypt to then when he ends up in the temple, which is at 12 years old. So, told you that they're very religious, and every year they would pack up the family. Now, you're not talking about just, you know, Mary, Joseph, and Jesus anymore. You're talking about a bulk of people would travel out to the Passover. So they all travel, they go out to the Passover, and they're having this big festival. Festival ends, everybody starts traveling back. Now, wasn't uncommon back then either that they traveled in packs, so you had family members and you had all this, and at some point they travel for almost a whole day. And at some point, somebody goes, where's Jesus? You know, nobody knows where Jesus is. So basically, they're asking the chickens, where's Jesus? You know where Jesus is? Nope. So then nobody knows where Jesus is. So they say, hey, he's got to be back up there. So they got to turn back around, make the trip back out. It says they looked for him for about 3 days and couldn't find him. They ended up finding him in the temple. While he was in the temple, they caught him teaching and listening and basically running the show. I mean, the people, the teachers, the prophets, all these people that, you know, basically studied the law their whole life were in awe of the answers he was giving. They were in shock of his knowledge of everything that, you know, he was saying. So I believe at this point, this is when Jesus starts to realize that there's something either different, or he's coming into that point that is destined for him at this point.